Hi everybody, and welcome back to Sew Along with Jan and the Kimberbell Mini Quilts. And this is the this is the June one. So we're going to be doing June. This is the end of April, actually. I'm trying to get them done around the first of the month previous to when it comes out. So this one is the June mini quilt. And this is going to be part one, and we're going to do a couple of blocks today in this one, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the cutting and the threads and so on. And then we'll do two blocks. We're going to do the blueberry blocks and the peach blocks. And then this one only has 4 blocks, so it should be 3 videos probably. So then we'll do the strawberries and the lemonade in another video, and then we'll do the assembly. So this will be the first video. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we need. So this is the June mini quilt. We're done with the first book. So the new ones haven't come out yet. This is the end of April, so I haven't seen the new ones come out yet. They're supposed to be out in May, so I hope they get out, before the 1st of June so I can do the July one. So we'll see what happens. So, all right, so let's take a look here. So here's our little mini quilt. I'm going to do fruit. And we'll talk a little bit about the threads, and I'll go in more into the threads as I, start sewing. But there's 2 colors of green, and the way I choose thread is I take my fabrics that I've chosen and take their color suggestions, and then I match my fabrics. So I did add a couple of extra colors in for this one. The greens were good. I had a darker green and a lighter green. I have a light blue, but then I did a couple of dark blues because the blues were, there was like 3 different blues in here. So I kind of matched all my fabrics and I wrote those colors down. And then there was a peach and a salmony color that are for like the peaches. And so I have a couple of colors of those. Like there's a lighter and a darker one. Gotta find the other one. Here it is. So there's a couple of these that are kind of peachy colored. And then there's a pink, and I did more of a rose because my pink is a little bit more on the rose side. And then a red, a white. I did a couple of yellows because my yellow fabric is very, very pale. So I did like lemon yellow and harvest gold. So I did a couple different yellows here. I might choose yellow. There's one in between here too, so I might actually choose yellow instead. I haven't. This one matched my fabric better for the quilting, so I did this one for the quilting. So we'll see what I want to do for the colors. And then there's an orange that's supposed to kind of match this piece of the, what do they call it, velveteen. And mine is not real orange, or it's not a real orange. It's more of this is called almond. So it's a little bit of a, more of a rusty orange. Just dropped it on the floor as usual. And it's more of a rusty orange. So I just kind of matched this. There it goes again. So I'm going to leave it on the floor this time. So it matches this pretty well. So that's what I did with the colors. So there's not a lot of colors. So when you're picking your colors, just take your fabrics, pick out your fabrics first, and then you can kind of see where they're going to use the colors. And I just take and match my fabrics. So, you don't have to have it exactly as here. I just kind of do, close, and I do 2 shades, like they had 2 shades of kind of a peach color and a red and a pink, and then they had 2 shades of green, but I just match my fabrics then. So okay, so there's our threads, and I'll tell you the colors I'm using as I'm embroidering. So all right, and then with the cutting, you bring this book over so you can see it a little bit. So here is the list of fabrics. And so what I did is I just go through and pick out fabrics from my stash that are fairly close to these. And I had a few of these. Like I didn't have some of these blues, so I have totally different blues. Like I have this blue for the back of my blueberries, but I think that's going to be pretty. It looks sort of like denim. And then I had a lighter blue for the blueberries. I have them kind of grouped together. So here's my lighter color for my blueberries. I didn't have the big enough piece, but I had several small pieces, so I think I'll be able to get it to work. And then I had a light blue for my lemonade, but I didn't have a plain one. So mine ended up having just a little bit of a print to it. So I thought, well, that'll be pretty. So we'll put that in there. And then my background fabric, I didn't have big polka dots, but I had one with little polka dots. And the stripe one I actually had, that's for the blueberry bowl. So you can see it tells you right here which block it goes with. So I just put them in a stack with those items. And so here's that blueberry bowl with the little stripes. I did have this green plaid, so there's that one for this background. And then there was some leaves in the a darker and a lighter green, and I had this darker green here, and then I had a lighter green. Where is it? Here it is. Here's the lighter green, if I can get a hold of it. There's the lighter green. So I had two shades of green for the leaves. The yellow is this for the background for the blueberries. So I had this yellow, and then I had a plain yellow for the lemonade block, and mine was pretty pale. So I did choose that real pale yellow to go with it. It's still darker than the fabric, but I thought it still looked okay. And there is one yellow in between. I might have to go to a lighter yellow to do some contrast. And then there's a little piece of white that goes on the strawberries jar. And then I actually did have that little stripe for the strawberries. So here's that little stripe, the little pink stripe. And I actually had these two little plain Kimberbell colors. I like their little colors, their little plain ones. So I did actually have a little piece of that. So I had enough of the red and the kind of that reddish pink, peachy pink color. And those are for the strawberries. So, all right. And then I actually did have that binding piece. It's the one with the little, I like the little flowers on it. So I have my binding cut out of that. Now the binding, they say to cut it at 2.5. Mine's 2 1/4. So I'll write that on here. So mine's 2 1/4 inches wide. I like a little bit tighter binding. So if you like yours 2.5, just cut it 2.5. And then my backing, I couldn't really see in the picture what color it was. It was like, it had like a little print on it. So I had some polka dots with little blue polka dots. So I thought this was kind of pretty. I thought that would look nice with some of the blues that were in here. So we're going to put blue polka dots on the back. And I have a piece of shape flex on the back of my backing. So that's the one thing I always add to the backing. Oh, and I forgot to cut my sleeve. There's a sleeve that's 6 by 12, and I forgot to cut my sleeve. So I'll talk about that in the assembly, but I must not have cut that. It's not here, so I will go cut that. But I always put a piece of shape flex on the back of my backing fabric because it just keeps it from being so wrinkly when you stitch in the ditch and stitch it together. And then cut your 6 by 12 inch piece for the sleeve, and we'll talk about that, and I'll have to go cut mine because I forgot. All right, so we'll lay these over here. And that's our cutting. And then you can see that I just read here, like the first blue went with the peaches and the second blue went with the blueberries. So I just marked my blocks, and then I kind of stacked them all together here like this so that they're all together. So here's all the pieces for the strawberries. And of course, we're going to need some embellishments. So let's turn these over for a second here. So if you got the embellishment pack, which is the easiest, here's the embellishments for this one. And then I think there was a piece of, these are all the embellishments. There's some little white beads and some little string and some glitter vinyl and so on. So that's in there. And I think there's a piece of clear vinyl in there. And then the other thing that was in here, let's see, was the, oh yeah, flexi foam. So there was a piece of flexi foam for the peaches block, and I just cut that. They used to stick those in the embellishment kits, but they've kind of stopped doing that. So I've noticed. So, and then we'll need, it looks like we need a little bit of wash away stabilizer and some topping, so that I'll grab that as we go along with the blocks here. So, all right. So I think we're ready. Now I don't usually cut, they tell you to cut your embellishments over here. I don't usually cut them. I just hold up what I've got. So there's some vinyl. I think there's some leather. Yeah, embroidery leather, some vinyl, and some in that velveteen. And then there's a piece of the clear vinyl in here. So that's the embellishment kit, okay? All right. So that's our cutting. So I just kind of put them together. And then let me talk about shape flex. So most of the blocks, need some shape flex on the parts. So let's talk first about just the blueberries, and we're going to do the blueberries and the peaches, I think, in the first video here. So let me do that, and we'll talk about the stuff as we go along. So this is the strawberries. Let's see. I think it's these two we're going to do. I think the first two blocks were blueberries and peaches. Yeah. So the blueberries, you needed to put the shape flex on the wrong side of the background and the bowl fabric. So I did put shape flex on the back of my bowl fabric and the back of my background. And I did put it on my lighter green because my light green for my leaves was pretty light, and it kind of showed through this dark background. So I went ahead and put a piece on that as well, just to keep the, you know, the color from coming through. And then let's see, light mesh. Okay, I think that was the only thing that was in this one. And then the peaches, let's look at the peaches block here. The peaches block says iron fusible backing to the wrong side of the background fabric and peaches felt. So I did the peaches felt. I was surprised. It's very light. It was very light, and so you could see the blue through this. So they had you put it on the back of the felt, which is unusual. And then I put it on the back of my backing. Okay, so this is for the peaches then. All right, and of course we're going to need no-show mesh in the hoop, and this block is going to finish, the quilting is going to be 4.5 by 6.5, so we should be able to get it in a 5 by 7 hoop. So I have a piece of no-show mesh in my 5 by 7 hoop, and then I've got my chunk of batting, because I don't cut my batting, so I just use chunks. So here's just a chunk of batting that we'll use for the whole little quilt here. And I use, what do I have? I have Hobbs 80/20. That's what I usually use, because it's got a little bit of loft, and I really think it looks nice because you can see the quilting just a little bit more on that than you can the real flat cotton batting. And it's not heavy or stiff. It's just got a little bit more loft to it. All right, so I guess we're going to start with these blueberries. This is going to be pretty. This is going to have a yellow background in that little bowl. And it looks like we're going to start with quilting. So let's see here. So we're going to do the block by block method as we've been doing with the rest of these. And we're going to, it says to do the block by block. It's the Pebble 2. So we're going to go get that one first. So I'm going to my stick to my mini quilts here. Background quilting. And it is Pebble 2. And then this one is going to be the 4 by 6. So the whole design will be 4.5 by 6.5. So it'll fit in the 5 by 7 hoop. All right, let's see here. 4 by 6. And it's going to be the vertical one. So this one right here. Because we're actually going to be sewing it vertically in the hoops. So, okay, so we got our 4 by 6 vertical, it says, and they're going to be aligned center. So I'm going to go ahead and set that, and then we're going to go get the blueberry design. So I'm going to hit add down here, go get back to my stick, to my mini quilts, embroidery files. Let's see here, and it's going to be June. Oh my gosh, can you believe we're doing the June one already? And this is going to be the blueberries. So here's the blueberries, and those automatically will come in centered, so you don't have to do anything for the quilt, for the, you know, moving it around or anything for this one, because they are machines. The Brother and Baby Lock machines automatically come in centered, so they should come right in on top of each other with no problem. And we're ready to stitch. Okay, so what we're going to start with, of course, is our quilting. There we go. And the same steps that we've been doing for all these other quilts will happen here. That the first step, and I think I'm going to put in, I think I'll put my yellow in that matches my background for my blueberry. This is the blueberries, so let me get my fabric here. So I'm going to put my color in that matches this, that will be my quilting, and I kind of needed to go to a little bit darker yellow. So my yellow is this Harvest Gold, which is 206, and there's more yellow in it, so I might go to a little lighter yellow, but we'll see. This one kind of matched my quilting though, so, or my fabric for my quilting. So we're going to put this in here. I've just got regular bobbin thread in my bobbin. I do use pre-wound, so I have a pre-wound bobbin in my tight bobbin case, since it's a pre-wound. And I've got my fabric here, and I think the first step then is going to be our placement line. Second here, I got some stuff in my hoop. The placement line for our batting. Get our batting ready here. And eventually I'll have to pick up my thread that, of course, I kept dropping on the floor here. See if I can get a hold of it. I'm going to set it over here on the side so I don't drop it again. All right, so there's our placement line for the batting. So that's always step number one. I'm going to get my little chunk of batting here. And we'll just lay it over the placement line. Get this all in here. So hopefully you can see I'm going to back off just a little bit so you can see a little bit better. Okay, and then the second step in the quilting is always going to be the tack down line for our batting. And you just want to watch, especially if you're using pieces, you want to kind of watch. Sometimes I have smaller pieces. I just happen to have some big ones, so. But I had to I used to cut them. So the cutting instructions, if you want to cut your batting to size for each block, is in the instructions for the quilting. So if you want to do that, you can do that. I figured I had to trim them anyway, so I might as well just use chunks, and it saved me a lot of time cutting. So now this has really cut down the cutting a lot because I don't have to trim all the batting down. So, all right, so then we're going to trim our batting close to the stitches. I'm going to use my Ginger 6-inch double curved scissors. These work really great for trimming applique because they have very pointy tips on them. I'll just lay this over here on the floor. They have very pointy tips, so you can get very close, which is good. Go all the way around. All right. I don't have to print off the instructions for the quilting anymore because I've done a lot of them. Okay, so then the third step is always going to be the placement line for our fabric, background fabric. So we're going to do that. And normally when I do these, I put the color in that I want to quilt the block with. And so I just put that color in and do all of these steps with the same color in the needle. Okay, then we're going to lay our fabric down. And I'm not sure, my fabric, I had just very little of this left, and it was just really a good fabric. I think it's actually going to go the right way. It's supposed to be going this way, and the block's going to go this way in the quilt. So I think I'm okay. I was hoping that my little squares wouldn't go the wrong direction. So we're going to lay it over the batting, and we're going to make sure it's fairly centered. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then we're going to do step number 4, which is going to be the tack down for our quilt, or our background fabric. And this is on page 7. We're on page 7 of the June instructions, just so you know. All right, so then, as usual, step number 5 is going to be the quilting. So I'm just going to go ahead and get the quilting started. I'll pause the camera for a few moments while it quilts. And I'll come back, and then we will start the actual embroidery. Okay, so we've got all of our quilting on here, and we have nice texture in it. I think it's very pretty with the little pebbles in there. So the first step of the actual embroidery design, it's on page 7 of the June instructions, is the placement line for the little bowl. Now, when I choose my colors for my my applique, I usually use the color that I'm going to be doing um, the final covering stitch with. Sometimes they'll stick a motif stitch in on me, and if you use another color, sometimes it will show through. So I have a tendency to change my color to do applique because then I know it's always going to be fine. So the first color I am going to use, I put white in. So here's my little, because I think the bowl is going to have white, let me check, I think the bowl has white satin stitches. So I kind of look ahead so I can tell, and I believe it has white satin stitches. Stitch the bowl satin stitches, yeah, I'm pretty sure they're white. And just so you know, I'm using Brother colors of thread, so you can use anything you have. Yes, so we're going to be having white satin stitches. So that's what we're going to use for our placement line and our tack down line. So the first one's going to be our placement line for the bowl. And then this is the actual embroidery file. It's a little hard to see in the white, I know, but you'll be able to see it enough that you can get it in here. So this is going to be the placement line. I'm going to lay my fabric, and again, this has shape flex on the back, and this fabric is directional, so I'm going to want to make sure that I get the stripes pretty straight. So let me get that on there. That looks pretty good. Covered my placement line, and now the next step will be the tack down line for the applique piece. And then we're going to trim. So I think they usually have you do most of the applique beforehand, and then they go back and do all the covering stitches. That's going to be really pretty. Seems like my machine's going awfully fast. I'll have to look and see what I have it set at. I usually set it at around 700 or 800. So, all right, so then we're going to trim this close to the stitches. Just be careful not to cut into your stitches. And then I think the next one is going to be the leaves. So we're going to be doing, I can't remember, I can't see if it's the dark leaves or the white leaves. I'll have to look at my colors. Because there's two sets of leaves. There's a darker set and a lighter set. So then we're going to trim leaves. There is SVG files available, or included with these designs if you want to cut all those little leaves out. But honestly, it takes me more time to get all the shape flex and everything on them than it just does to trim them in the hoop. So I usually trim in the hoop unless it's really intricate lettering. That's something I often cut out with a scan and cut. All right, so then the next one is going to be my leaf placement line. So I need to check my colors here. I'm not sure if it's going to be the lighter or the darker first. I don't know that it really matters. They're both the same size, but I was going to look at my color of thread and see what it says. So it looks like it's going to be the darker color first, because it looks like, yes, the darker color. So the symbols are very similar. So this is the darker green. So let's choose the darker green first. And mine is going to be moss green, which is 515. Let's see here. I'm trying to see, let's see, stitch the leaf one placement line. So this is the stitch one leaf placement line, and then the tack down lines, and then you're going to trim. And then it's going to do the decorative outlines. Oh, okay, so it is going to do the decorative outlines on these next. So we're going to have this darker thread in. So this is going to be the darker fabric. Okay, so we're going to get our placement lines on here. And then I'll be back in a minute and we'll do our, it's going to take a little bit because there's a whole bunch of these little leaves on here. So I'll let them go, and then I will be back in a minute. We'll put our fabric on and do the tack down line. Okay, so we got all these little placement lines done, and then we're going to take our darker fabric, and this one does not have any shape flecks on the back because it didn't show through, it was dark enough. So we're going to lay that over, and they just did one big piece so that you could get the whole thing done. So I'm going to lay that over all of those little placement lines, and then the next step is going to be the tack down lines, and then we're going to be trimming all those little leaves out. And this one might have been nice to do in the Scan and Cut, but the leaves were so small. I kind of looked at them thinking, maybe I should do that and cut them out with the Scan and Cut. But they're so tiny. Sometimes little tiny pieces like that don't cut terribly well because they're so small, and if your mat's not sticky enough, they don't stay down well enough. So anyway, so we're going to trim them out in the machine. So we'll just trim them out this way, and then I might turn the camera off while I trim because it might take me a few minutes to do that. But it's doing the tack down lines now. Okay, so we've got all these little tack down lines in here. So I'm going to trim these. Whoops, got a little jump stitch that didn't clip here. Every now and then my machine doesn't clip the jump. I don't know why. Just didn't want to, I guess, that time. So we're going to trim these close to the stitches. I'll get started, but it's going to take me a few minutes to do this just because they're small. But they're so tiny and they're so simple little shapes that I just thought it would be easier to do it this way. And I'll just trim these all out, and then I'll come back and show you what my little leaves are. And the next step is going to be the tack or the little decorative outlines on these. So I'll just go ahead and finish my trimming, and then I will be back in a moment. Okay, so there's all my little teeny leaves, and boy, I tell you, there's a couple of those. I don't know how well they would have cut if I would have cut them out with the Scan and Cut. So they're pretty little, but I got them all trimmed. They weren't bad at all. They were just they're pretty simple shapes, so it wasn't bad. So now the next step is going to be all the little decorative outlines, and these are going to be a motif stitch. So that's why I always change my thread when I do my appliques now, because so often I would get caught and it was not, it was a motif stitch and I didn't realize it when I looked at the design. Sometimes it doesn't show very well when you're looking at it, and those motif stitches will show through. If you had white thread under there, it would have shown through. So I like to change my thread. Takes a little extra time, but it's definitely worth it. So I still have this dark moss green in here. And then I'm going to let these stitch, and then the next step is going to be, I think we have to do, some of the satin stitch for the bowl before we do the next set of leaves. Okay, so it did part of the outlines. It didn't do all of them because we need to put some of the satin stitches in on the bowl before we go on with the rest of the leaves. So I'm going to go ahead and put my white in then for my satin stitches on the bowl. And then we're going to go back to the green and finish up the decorative stitches on those. So let's go get our white here. And it's going to do part of the bowl, stitch the satin, outline 1, and bowl accent. So there might be a little bit extra white here in a little bit. So I haven't turned the page yet. So we're going to do the satin stitch on the bowl. And then we're going to go back to the green to do some more of the leaves. Okay, so we've got our satin stitches partially on. There'll be a little bit more, I think, once we get some more leaves. We're going to go back and do a couple more of the leaves, decorative stitches. So I think there's just a couple here that haven't finished yet. So we'll do those next. I went back to my moss green thread. And then I think the next step is going to be, I need to turn the page here. I think we're going to be moving on to the other set of leaves. Yes, so we'll move on to the other set of leaves and do those next. Okay, so the next step is going to be the placement line for the second color of leaves. And my leaves are quite a lot lighter, and it says to use this real dark color. So I think I'm going to switch over to my lighter green. I like my fabric to match my thread, and that dark is so dark compared to my lighter color here. So we're just going to switch the colors. It says to use the darker one. This is fresh green, number, I think it's 027. I use these two greens together a lot. So we're going to do this one, and this is the placement lines for the second set. So we'll get the placement lines on here, and then we're going to lay our fabric over that. So I'll get those started. And then I will lay my fabric and we'll do the tack down lines. Okay, so I'm ready for the fabric now. I've got all my little placement lines on here. I'm going to lay this on and make sure I get it all covered up. There's one here. I think, oh, there's one way over here too. So I got to make sure I get it all covered up. So we'll make sure. Looks like it's okay. And then we're going to do the tack down lines for these, and then we'll trim this set of leaves. So get these started. I just decided I think I wanted the lighter color. I thought it might be a little stark with this because my fabric was a little bit lighter than they called for, and because this is the one I had. So we'll see how this lighter color goes together. Okay, so I'm ready for trimming, and I'm going to go ahead and trim close to the stitches. Now this one did have, I did put the shape flex on the back of this fabric just because mine was so light colored. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim close to the stitches on this one, and then the next step will be the decorative outlines. So I'll just turn the camera off while I do the trimming. It takes me a little while to do this. It's a little small, but it doesn't take too long. So we'll go ahead and turn the camera off while I finish my trimming, and then we'll be ready for the decorative outlines on the second set of leaves. Okay, so there's all my lighter colored leaves. And my advice to you with these small ones is just take your time doing the trimming. It helps to take the fabric and pull up just a little bit on it, because then you can get a little closer. But just take your time because they are very small. So now I'm going to go ahead and start the next step, which is going to be, this is step number 10 on page 8 of the instructions, doing the decorative outlines on the second set of leaves. Okay, so now I've got all my little leaves decorated, and we're going to move on to the blueberries. So the next step is the placement line for the blueberry fabric, which is over here. Now I didn't have quite a big enough piece, so we're going to be working with, I had several pieces of, this look like a good blueberry color, so I think there's enough here to do it. I'm just going to have to play around. I didn't have a big enough piece for what they told me to cut, so we're going to do our placement lines first, and then we're going to try to make these little pieces work here. So for our blueberries, there's like two little splotches down at the bottom, and then there's like all the way across the top, so hopefully we'll have enough here. So we'll be back in a minute when we get all of the little placement lines done. Okay, so I've got all these little pieces. I think this will work. This piece here will go all around along the top here, so I think that'll be fine because that covers up over there. And then I've got these two little bunches here, so I think we can cut this one in half and put it over the little, no, maybe not even half, just to put these down here. So let's just cut some little pieces. It told you to cut this great big piece, and I didn't have quite enough of this, and I just thought it was a good color. So we're just going to lay this over here, and then we'll lay this one down here like that. And I think it'll be fine. I'm going to watch and if you're worried about it, you can always tape it down, but I don't think this is going to go, the foot's going to go over this part, and then it's going to pop up and go down and do these. So I think it'll be fine. So we'll just kind of watch it. So now we're going to do our placement line, because I think this piece was supposed to be like the whole size, and I just didn't have quite enough. So we're going to do it this way. I think it'll work just fine. So I can have the blueberries the color I wanted. And I'll be back in a minute and we'll do the trimming. Okay, so I've got all my little blueberries stitched down here, and it did work out fine. I had some little pieces and it worked out fine. So I'm going to be doing my trimming, and it'll take me a little bit to do this. As you can see, they're pretty small as well. So this one might have worked out better on the scan and cut possibly, because it is pretty small. So I'm going to go ahead and trim these all out, and then I will be back in a moment and we will do the I think the tack down line is or the decorative stitch line is the next one. And then there's going to be some little decorative pieces with a lighter blue on the top of the blueberries. So I'll be back in a moment when I'm all done with my trimming. All right, so I got my little blueberries trimmed. Now I have to say those were pretty small. There was a couple little spots. So it's real important to have a very pointy embroidery scissors. So these little gingers work very well to get into some of those little tiny spots. So now we're ready for the decorative outline on the blueberries. So I'm going to leave that same color in. And I think this was called Blue Granite 1034. So it's kind of a dusty blue. And then I'm going to do my decorative outlines on my little blueberries. Okay, so I've got all the little decorative outlines around, well, not all of them, they did part of them, and now they're going to do the little berry stems, the blueberry stems. So I chose a lighter blue for that, and this is step number 14 on page 8. So I'm going to go ahead and put a light blue, it's 017 light blue, and it's going to do all those little stems and all those little blueberries, and then I think it's going to go and do a little bit more satin stitching on the bowl, and then back to some leaves again, the blueberries. So we're going to be doing a lot of little bits here yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and let this stitch, and then I'll be back when we get ready to do some of the other pieces. Okay, so now there's some more little bit of satin stitch on the white for the bowl. And then there's some little accents that are out here on the outside, and those are done in white. So I'm going to do a couple of steps. This is step number 15 and 16 on page number 8. So I'll do a couple of steps, and then we'll come back and I'll let you know what the last little bits are. Because look at the little centers, aren't those adorable? And you have to kind of go back and forth again between the blue, the green, and I think maybe the dark blue, the light blue, and the green yet to do a little bit more of the leaves, so that you must have had to do these in several layers. So we'll do the white first, and I'll be back and I'll show you how I'll finish it up. Okay, so the last 3 steps are going to be just a little bit more of the decorative outlines on the leaves. There's a little bit of leaf here. There's a couple more of the little bits of the blueberry that need to be covered, and then a couple more of the little stems. So I'm going to do those three little steps, and then I'll come back. So you can see you got the little white bit of the bowl on here, and then it did these little chevrons out here on the sides. There's one on each side. You probably can't see this one too well over here. But I'm going to finish up these last little 3 pieces. Now I am using the lighter colored green because my leaves, the second set of leaves was the lighter color. So I'm using that. And then I'm going to go back to my blueberry outline and my little stem outline colors. So I'll be back in a moment when I'm all done. Okay, so I got the final little decorative outlines on my leaves. That was 17. 18 is the decorative outlines on the blueberries. And 19 was the decorative outline, the little stem, or not the decorative outlines, but these little stems. So that's a light blue. And then there is actually one more step. The final step is just some trimming lines. So I'm just going to leave the blue thread in, and I'll just do the trimming lines on the top and the bottom of the block. And we'll be done. This is just going to help us get it centered. So just leave something in that is a different color than your fabric. This is not real dark, but I can see it okay when I go to trim. So sorry, my cat decided she wanted to sit on the arm of the embroidery machine, and the arm just came over and whacked her. She doesn't like that when that happens very well. So okay, so there's our 2 little trimming lines that will help us trim our block, and we're going to do the trimming after we finish the second block. So here's our little, oh my gosh, those are so cute. Look at all of the detail. And what made it so cool is that there was all the layers of the little berries and everything. Isn't that amazing? And those were small little places to trim. It took me a little bit to trim those, but isn't that adorable? So there's our first blueberry block. So now we're going to get ready here, and we're going to do, I think the second block is the peaches. Yeah, so we're going to do the peaches in this video too. So give me a moment to get set up to start the peaches. Okay, so let's move on to the peaches block here, and we'll get our designs and everything. And this is on page 9 of the instructions. So we're going to go over here, and it says to use, for the quilting block by block, it's the loops 3. So we're going to go get that first. And we're still going to have our no-show mesh in the hoop, and it's in a 5x7 hoop because this block's the same size. So we're going to go get our mini quilts, and this one's going to be the loops 3. So let's get the background quilting and loops 3, and it's going to be, again, the 4x6, and it says vertical. So let's see here, 4x6 vertical. So it's this one, because we're going to be turning it this way, so it's going to be going up and down then. So that'll be nice. So we'll hit set, and then we're going to go get the peaches block. So we'll hit add down here and go get the peaches block. Embroidery files. Let's see, we're in June. Can't believe it. We're doing the June one. Here's the peaches. Okay, and these come in centered, so they automatically will center in the Brother and Baby lock machine. So we're going to hit set, so I think we're good there. And we're going to hit embroidery. So the first part, again, is going to be the quilting section. So I have a darker blue thread that matches this fabric. This is my background fabric. And then you're going to have some of the felt for some of the peaches, and then that piece of velveteen and a piece of this foam for the peaches. So we're going to go ahead and start with this. I've got my batting over here, so we're going to go ahead. First step, of course, is going to be our placement line for our batting. And get my book over here so that I can see what we're doing. And we're going to start with our quilting. So these blocks on the side are all 4x6. I think there's 3 of them. Yeah, the strawberries is the other one. So they're all 4x6 finished. And then the other block on the left-hand side is just one big long block for the whole thing. So that's the lemonade one. So we're going to go ahead and get our batting up here. I've still just got my chunks. We're going to go ahead and do our tack down line. That's step number 2 in all of the quilting designs. This one's really cute, and it doesn't have quite as many pieces. My goodness, the blueberries, I couldn't get over how many layers there were. So it was pretty cool. It turned out really neat. Lots of little layers of stitching over the applique pieces. Not sure if you can see them. Go back a little bit. All right, so then we're going to trim. I got to find my scissors here. I spend most of my life looking for my scissors. All right, so then we're going to trim our batting close to the stitches. And then the third step of the quilting is always the placement line for the fabric. And you wouldn't have to use the placement line, but I always do because there are times when I need that placement line, and then if I skip it part of the time, then I forget to sew it when I really need it. So I just do it because then I don't forget later when I'm needing it for a specific technique. All right, so we'll do our placement line for the fabric. And I think this color was like Casino Royale, my dark blue, because it matched this fabric pretty well. And then we'll be using some of the peachy colors for the peaches, and then that kind of orangey peach color. So, all right, so there's my placement line for my fabric, and I'm going to take, and now my fabric, remember, does have the shape flex on the back of the background fabric. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get this as centered as I can, and then it will tack down the fabric. I also put shape flex on the back of the felt, which was unusual, but it's kind of light colored, and this was quite dark, so it did show through, and it did say to put it on. I thought that was unusual. You'd put it on the felt, but it is quite light colored compared to the background. So, all right, so we're going to get this tacked down, and then the step number 5 in the quilting is always the actual quilting itself. So I'll go ahead and do the quilting. Be right back, and we'll start the peaches. I think this is, yeah, this is the little loops. Okay, so we've got our quilting done. My thread was very matchy, so you can probably just see some texture. It's very, very matching. So the next step is going to be the first step in the actual embroidery design on page 9, and we're going to stitch the peaches placement line. So again, I am going to switch to my thread that matches the first placement line is going to be for the felt part. So I picked the color that matched this, which was, it was called Pink Melon, I think. So we're going to stitch the first step of that, which is going to be our placement line. And get ready here to do the applique. So we're going to do the 2 peaches first, like the double peaches, and then we'll do the velveteen peach. And that one's actually going to have the foam under it. So then we're just going to lay our felt down. And again, this has the shape flex on the back. I'm going to lay this down. Let's see here how it will work the best here. That looks pretty good. Okay. And then I'm going to tack this down, and then we're going to trim. Just going to kind of hold it a little bit. I'm trying to conserve this so that I might be able to get a second one out of here. Nice. There's our peaches. So then we're going to trim these close to the stitches, and then we're going to be ready for the foam piece that's going to go under the velveteen. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this close to the stitches. It's a little harder to trim since it has that stuff in there, the shape flex. Get that trimmed around there. At least this is an easier one to trim. My goodness, those blueberries were something else. Lots of little pieces around there. This will be faster. I don't know that I've ever done a Kimberbell applique that had that many small pieces. It was very small. All right, so there's the peaches. Okay, so then the next step is going to be the foam. Look at my book here. My cat decided to help me here. So we're going to do the foam first. So we need a little bit of loft in here. So I'm going to go ahead and use the same color though that I'm going to be sewing down the fabric with. And this is my almond. It's like 1113, I believe. So it's kind of an orangey rust color. So get that in here. And do the placement line for the foam. Okay, so look at that. Get our little piece of foam here. I need my lint roller. That's the only bad thing about this velveteen. It is so ravelly. And it just got lint everywhere. All these little pieces. So I'm going to pull this off just a little bit so that I don't have it all over my table here. Have a lint roller around. It really helps with this kind of stuff. Okay, so we're going to start though with the foam. So this is step number, let's see. This is step number 3. So this is the foam. So, and then step number 4 is going to tack the foam down. So we're going to do this next. I'm just going to hold it in place. And then we'll trim this. Now the foam is always a little weird to trim because you do have to kind of pull up on it. Come on, Gigi. Gigi's trying to help me. So we're going to trim this. And when I trim this, I kind of like to pull up just a little bit, because then you want to get pretty close to the stitches so you don't have too much bulk in there. The fabric will go down over the top, but it's nice to not have any more bulk than is necessary in there. And there's, 2 layers of tricot and then the layer of foam in the middle, so it makes it a little hard to trim sometimes. So I'm just kind of pulling up on it a little bit. There we go. Okay, so that was step number, trimming, place the, let's see, stitch the placement line, trim the foam close to this. Okay, then stitch the peach 1 placement line. So then we're going to do a placement line so we make sure we get our velveteen in the right spot. I'm just going to leave that same color in. And then we're going to place the peach velveteen right side up. Make sure, I don't know which way would be best to lay it. There's kind of a nap to this, so I think I'm going to have the nap kind of go down. So I'll just lay it this way because the nap's going this way. And then cover that up. I think I could move it over a little bit, but it's easier in the middle. I've got some more of this in the other room. So, okay, so there's that. And then the next step will be the tack down line for our peach. And then we're going to trim it close to the stitches. And when you have that foam in there, it helps a little bit to kind of hold it and pull it out so you don't get a pucker like I just did, but I think it'll still come out. I try to kind of hold it so I don't get a pucker because it's kind of poofy, you know. And this is kind of stretchy, but I think it'll come out. I think it'll work out okay. And you can kind of work it out with your fingernail. I think it's going to be all right. Yeah, I think it will once it does the satin stitches. Okay, so then we're going to trim this one close to the stitches. Try not to cut through your stitches because it's kind of bulky with that foam in there. Oops, here. And then remember, there's some felt underneath. Kind of wants to cut or grab the tip of your scissors a little bit. Okay. Might need my lint roller again. I also don't like to work with Minky because it just gets all over the place. All the little pieces. But this velveteen is terrible. So that's why I always keep my little lint roller here because then I can get it off of my hoop. So that's a good thing to have around. It also works well for long arms because you can use it to get, like, if you have, like, you know, pieces of thread that are loose, you can get rid of those. Oh my gosh, lint rollers are great. So I always have one laying next to my sewing machine. Okay, there's that. That looks a little bit better. Then I'm going to turn the page. So we're going on to page 10 here. And it says stitch the leaves placement line. So now we're going to go to the leaves. Now my leaves, might need the lint roller for that too. The leaves are this dark green. So I'm going to go to my darker green, which is moss green. And because I think maybe these leaves are satin stitches, so they'd be okay to not do this. But I just do this every time because I've gotten caught so many times and I realized, oh, I did those all in white and then they're motif stitches. So it's just easier to change the thread. Then I don't forget to do it on one that I really needed. So these are going to be the leaf placement lines. So here's our leaves. And then we're going to lay our fabric down, this darker fabric. Whoops. There's quite a few little leaves on this one. There's one on this peach and there's two on each of the others. They just had you cut one bigger piece. Okay, so I've got my placement lines on here for my leaves. They're kind of over here, so we'll lay the fabric down. And this one doesn't have any shape flex on it. It's fine. It was dark enough. And then we'll do the next step, which is the tack down line for our leaves, and then we're going to trim the leaves. Okay, so I'm going to trim my leaves. And, you know, this might take me a minute because they're pretty small too. So I'm going to turn the camera off, but I'm going to trim my leaves close to the stitches. And then we're going to do the, it's going to go back and do the satin stitches around the peaches first and then do the peaches and then the leaves. So give me just a moment. I'll get these all trimmed close to the stitches and then we'll be ready for some satin stitching. Okay, so we're ready for step number 9 on page 10, and this is going to be the satin stitches for the lighter colored peaches. Looks like I got some green in there. So it's going to do that satin stitching, and then we're going to move on to the satin stitching on this peach. Okay, so we're ready for the satin stitch around our little poofy peach over here, and I'm doing that in my almond again. So we're going to do the satin stitch on that, and then I think we move on to the leaves after that. Get this started, and then I'll be back when we're ready to go on to the leaves. Okay, so this is step number 11 on page 10, and this is going to be the satin stitches for the leaves. And then we're going to start doing some of the little details. So the next step will be some of the little details in the peaches. And there's a couple of rows, there's a couple of steps of that, 12 and 13. And then we're going to go and do, there's some little chevrons up on the background that we'll do it towards the end. Okay, so steps number 12 and 13 on page 10 are going to be the details in the peaches. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch out both of those, and they're done in white, and then we'll move on to the little details that are, there's some little chevron details around the outside edge. So we'll do these with the white, and it's going to do the little velveteen peach first, and then it's going to move on and do the little felt ones. Okay, so step number 14 is going to be some of these little chevrons down here on the background, and I think these are done in yellow, so I thought I'd use my lemon yellow that I'm going to do my lemonade stuff in. So we'll use the lemon yellow, which is a light yellow. Get that ready, and we will put the little chevrons on, and then the next step, so I think I'll do all the chevrons. There's two little sets of chevrons at the bottom that are yellow, and then there's a third one that's going to be back in the peachy color. So I'll do all of those before I come back on, and then the final step is going to be some more trimming lines. So here's the chevrons in the yellow. There's two sets of yellow. They're on the two bottom, and then the peachy ones are kind of up here on this side. So okay, so the final step in this block is again going to be some trimming lines. So I'm just going to leave my peach colored thread in. It's just going to do the little guidelines like it did in the last block along the top and the bottom to help us get it centered. Those are really cute. I have to do some jump stitches. There's a couple jump stitches in there. And then we're going to get ready here to do our trimming of our blocks. And we'll have the first two blocks done, and then we'll be ready to move on to the second video where we'll do blocks 3 and 4. So there's our little lines to help us trim. And here is our block with the peaches. Oh my gosh, that's so cute. I love it. So look at that. So this one's all poofy because it's got the foam under it. Isn't that neat? So there's our second block. So now I'm going to move the camera over just a little bit so that we can do our trimming, and then we'll be ready to go on to the second video for the next two blocks. Okay, so we're ready to do our trimming, and I've got my 4.5 by 6.5 inch orange pop ruler here to do the trimming. And those little lines that we sewed in, I don't know if you can see them too well, but they're light blue on this one. This is the blueberries. There's also a little arrow, and it's going to be very hard to see on the ruler, but there's a little arrow we're going to put on those little ticks that are in the center there. So I'm just going to lay my 4.5 by 6.5 inch orange pop ruler, and I'm going to line up those little arrows pointing, and I can see them well on the fabric. And I've got my Martelli mat here, and of course I can't find my rotary cutter, so give me a second. It's here somewhere. Oh, here it is. That's the other thing I seem to look for all the time. All right, so I've got my Martelli mat here. I'm going to turn this because when you're using these orange pop rulers, you're going to be trimming on the inside, and it's a little awkward when you first start doing this, but once you get the hang of it, it actually works very well. Just take your time. I'm lining up my little arrows, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start in the corner here. I'm going to push against the inside of the ruler. I'm going to pull back into the corner and push forward. Now I am left-handed, so if you're right-handed, you're going to be starting on this side. But I'm left-handed, so everything's probably backwards to you. I do use a rotary cutter left-handed. I'm a little more steady. I can use a right-handed one too, but I have found that I'm steadier if I use my left-handed one, especially when doing this, because this is just a little bit, take your time doing these. If it's easier for you, take a marking pen and just mark, and then you can use a regular rotary cutter and ruler, to cut it out instead of in here. Some people have a little trouble cutting on the inside, but once you get the hang of it, and just take your time, don't get excited when you're doing it. Just take your time and don't get in a hurry. All right, so we're going to go ahead. Whoops, I got a little spot there. There we go. Whoops, got a little spot down here too. Need a new blade. There we go. All right, so there's our first blueberry block. Oh my gosh, that's so cute. Very cute. That one had lots of little details in it, didn't it? So then let's do the other block. These are both going to be 4.5 by 6.5. So this one's also the same size. And then it has the little cutting guides too. So we're going to line up our little center marks on those two little guides, and we're going to do the same thing. 4.5 by 6.5. So I'm going to trim on this side. Turn the mat. These really, if you have a one of these Martelli mats, this has been the best mat because it moves. Some of the turning mats don't move very well, and they catch when they move. And this one has like a Lazy Susan on it, so it is way better than any one I ever have had before. All right, so there is our peaches. There's our peaches block. So we got our first 2 blocks done in our June quilt, mini quilt. Okay, so with the next video will be the strawberries block and the lemonade block. So we'll do those in the next video. So thank you so much for joining me for the first video of the June mini quilt by Kimberbell. And if you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do. That way you get it's free. You don't have to pay anything to subscribe, and then you will get the notifications when I have new videos available to watch. So I'll see you in the next video for part 2 of the June mini quilt by Kimberbell. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.